Aloha. So, I had a couple thoughts that come to me, and one of them just happens to be more associated with today's topic. Now, I want to talk about the moon. Now, since we're about to approach the Capricorn new moon, which is a start of a cycle leading to the full moon's culmination and then the phasing out back to the new moon of the next sign, we are getting ready to plant seeds of intention so that they may manifest. And depending on where it is in your chart, you might have it in a certain house, which holds influence on how it affects you. Now, my idea to come into this is to give a sense of why the moon has such sway in terms of how we are building, how we're growing, and how it has a direct influence over you. Now, the thing is, the influence over you is not one where you have no power against. This is more of an influence where it's a song that's going on, and whether you're willing to feel that groove is up to you. So, with the moon coming into play, it's a satellite of Earth itself. So, we're Earth, we're here, we tend to be the point of view in which we're looking out at all the other planets and stars. Whether you're seeing the zodiac that goes all the way around, the 12 paths as I like to call it, or you're looking at the planets. We are seeing Capricorn, which is just right past the galactic center if we were to look out at the star constellations. And we're going to see this resonance of Capricorn being more of a very big dominant resonance at this moment due to the fact that we have the Sun, Saturn, the Moon coming back into Capricorn. We have Venus and the Sun still in it, but they're about to phase out into Aquarius not too long away from today. But the moon itself is what my core topic of today's video is about. Not just the energies of the current present moment, but why it does what it does. Now, the moon, since it's a satellite of the Earth, has its own existence inside the electromagnetic fields that exist within Earth. For example, there's the smaller fields that wrap around Earth, and there's the larger fields that go around Earth and the Moon. Now, they all exist to a varying degree depending on how much energy it is to the source. No different than an auric field of a human body, it exists nonetheless. And at the same time too, when the sun is giving off its own rays as well as allowing the cosmic rays to come through, and it comes through the spiral of the universe, our particular solar system, we are receiving that through and around the electromagnetics that come in where the poles are. Now, this is due to the fact of how the electromagnetics work in terms of a torus. So, since the moon exists inside this, we're getting an interpersonal connection with the moon. The moon, in astrology, has a tendency to rule feelings, the internal self, the inner body in which one can be recognized but not seen externally. So, on an individual's natal chart, one can perceive the moon and where the moon is positioned inside your chart and sign to be who you are on the inside, how you're emotionally satisfied, what brings you joy to the core, and what touches home to you emotionally. Now, the sign that rules the moon is Cancer. It's not more of a ruling, it's more of association. Due to the fact that it's well known for its feelings, it's well known for its connection to emotions. It's a water sign, and water is going to be a big deal when it comes to this, as we'll talk about why that's so connected to emotions and feelings to begin with. But it's geared towards to the home, to the inner self, to the security of within. So having that security within is the emotional balance of allowing yourself to be fulfilled, to feel secure so that you can be comfortable. Now, due to the moon being within our own electromagnetic presence, we are seeing some of the effects. For example, the way that the tides come and go, the pull that the tides have due to the moon's presence, and that, I guess, overall metaphysical perspective in terms of relating water to emotions. Now, anyone who's seen tarot, looked into alchemy, or understand the presence of the metaphysical approach towards life sees that water can carry emotion. There is studies and tests done that has displayed the same exact hypothesis and has seen its effects right there in person. Whether you take water and you give intention and you give more emotion, expression, these are waves coming out of your field. And when you freeze it, you can literally see the structure of how the water froze, whether it's a harmonic in tune sense where it's stabilized, or it's disharmonic where it's just a bunch of gunk and has a distortion to it. Now, because we're able to perceive that water is a body of emotion, it holds motion, it holds memory, and forms just like a crystal does, but it's a constant liquid in terms of outside of its ice and steam portions. So when it's in this fluid state, it becomes flexible where it can absorb, but at the same time too, it can restabilize and it can clear itself, depending on what you have and what you have around it. But whatever it does take in, it will hold on to due to its memory portion. And I think this memory portion is due to how the structure of water acting like a bunch of geometric, flexible connections, and inside the little gaps in which the oxygen exists, the H2O I should propose, you're seeing either the hydrogen or the oxygen fulfilling a place for which that memory is existing within. So now you have the structure of water becoming key into understanding how both quartz crystal works and how receptive one can be towards emotions and memory. It is said that our gut tends to have the most emotions in terms of clearing our shadow selves. So if this is due to the fact that we're mostly water, a lot of this water that exists within us tends to hold some of those emotions and memories. And they may be easier for us to access, or they may be holding us down in a manner where the shadow self comes out. There's a lot of different aspects in which this can be perceived, but that's more of a metaphysical or Ayurvedic talk. So in this particular subject, going back to the moon, if the moon has a sway over the tides of the earth, that metaphysical relation to humanities on a collective scale is going to be perceived through the collective's emotion. Now, with any collective expression, we're getting a portion, a percentage of the people who exist around Earth to bring this out, to manifest it. It's more in tune to there's some sort of calling within to express it, or it comes up through their natural aspects that it's associated through them, like a light going through a prism. You're going to see it come out in terms of that prism's structure and shape. So think of that in terms of the human aspect as we're on our own being in our own electromagnetic fields, the light, the resonance, the tune in which we are starting to pick up on tends to be expressed through us. Now there's more of a complication to that due to the free will factor, but this is more why the influence of astrology of the planets takes heed to why it has a perspective towards what we're perceiving as we're navigating through the ever-present. So with the moon always moving, we're looking about 2.5 days, it switches to another sign. And given the whole 28-day cycle, 29.5 possibly, in terms of how it can go around the Earth, it's not a perfect circle in terms of rotating and orbiting around. But at that same time too, the face of the moon is constantly being in one direction due to the fact of how it can roll around the Earth. Now when it's doing this, we can dissect the structure of the moon, whether it's more than just a satellite, if it could be a base, if it's more than a rock, it could be hollow. I've seen research where the echoes off it, I can see aspects with the light off it. There's many terminologies that tend to try to deconstruct the moon, but its presence itself, regardless of what it is, still holds this effect, due to it being able to have its own power over the water. We're seeing that this rules the emotional realms of who we are. Now, as one can get into Capricorn, Capricorn tends to have a resonance more in tune to being more structured and managed and being able to allow for a sort of set course of practical, systematic, authoritative approach towards being clear, being direct, and allowing one to balance that through their own emotions of just being clear. So as that goes through all the different signs, each sign has its own attunement to what it can be expressed as. With this Capricorn new moon, this is seeing both the sun, the moon, and the earth line up to the degree where all the energy coming from the sun is going to go through the moon and then through the earth, which is why this allows for more of a receptive manifestation point in terms of setting your intentions out there, because it will allow the boost to come towards of an extra sunlight, and then by the time the full moon hits, it will carry that forward in terms of allowing that manifestation cycle to take place. Because you brought it all the way around, now you're pulling from the earth to the moon. So you're creating the gap and then seeing the other end of it. So this creates a nice little cycle in terms of one being able to manifest during this moon phase. Now this can occur through multiple moon phases, and we're now stepping into more of a lunar eclipse, which is approaching our way. Now this lunar eclipse too is when the moon falls into a certain degree based on its nodes of how the earth is able to block it directly. Now these hold an even stronger impact because normal full moons could be just anywhere on the other side of the earth relative to the sun. As you will see the reflection of the light hitting the moon, it is not blocked by the earth itself. But when you have a lunar eclipse, the earth itself is then blocking the light, allowing for the spectrum to show the red on the moon when it becomes a blood red moon. This is more the lunar eclipse tradition, but at the same time too, this signifies why the importance of these eclipses take place to allow for a greater form of manifestation. So dealing with the emotion factor of it, we're more in tune to be able to harness or step into this type of energy and utilize it to a greater scale. Now there are going to be other aspects in terms of planets and where the sun is and all this other stuff taking key in what you're manifesting and what your individual self is going to be going through during this time period relative to the as above so below principle. Now when we look at the moon, we're taking a look at the body itself. So how it affects is more of a study of nature. When we take what the moon is, we're removing what the subject matter of its effect is and focusing more on almost classification in terms of what we're working with. Now, one can harness the reflection of how one can look at something and define it, as well as look at something, not define it, but see its effects. This is essentially why the study of astrology takes place to not be a validation of a pure science mathematic approach, but a relative resonance, self-fulfilling, comparative approach towards, alright, we're seeing the effects of it, and after long-term effects, we can pick up on the patterns and associations. So, now where does this leave us? With the moon traveling in all the signs in a 28-day cycle, we're allowing ourselves to be even more receptive than Mercury or any of the other planets that exist external to our earthly home. This is bringing us to develop at a 2.5-day type of cycle, where as it goes into each different sign, we're picking up a little different sway. That means 1 out of the 12 signs is going to be the sign that you actually have. And when the moon is in that sign for your personal self, you're given a nice little boost of emotional satisfaction because things are going to come easier to you, and the things that are going to be coming up are going to be more associated to what your moon specific sign is going to be actually like defining or bringing about. So when it rolls the emotional self, I like to think that there's 3 portions of the self that are more of the basic aspect of perceiving a natal chart. There is the rising sign, which is what others perceive you to be. Think of it like you being reached out into the world, and it's the cone that connects you. And then there's the sun, which is the light that reaches inside you, that becomes you, that comes through you. And then there's the moon. This moon is going to be this internal factor. As these two are external and can be perceived through the people around you, this is something that only you yourself can identify and recognize. With that at hand, your emotions are going to be a very huge factor in being able to work with yourself, work with your shadow self, and understand yourself completely. So if you do not know your moon sign, it could be very important for you to tap into your more emotional feminine side, as there is an aspect to see that we have our mental structure in terms of being able to think and discuss and form ideas. We have an equivalent emotional around our gut in forms of allowing this to be connected to how we're actually sitting and feeling inside these expressed emotions. As one cannot define with words what an emotion is, this is more a sense of how we're interpreting it and finding the language to give it form. Now, the form itself that we give the language to is different than what we're actually defining as. It's trying to explain color to a blind person. It is not something that could be done at the human scale that is actually tangible or translatable. It's merely taking the best guess of what it can be expressed as. So when we're taking the emotions of it and the moon, we're seeing the moon for it being its own aspect of being in that space, taking its form, seeing its cycle, and applying that cycle to see how it relates to the emotional scale. And now going back to how the tides are affected by the moon's position and where it's located at, we're seeing it geared towards different paths in terms of the zodiacal cycle. Now, each cycle is going to have its own phase and it's going to have its own energy. So when you're seeing all of it take form, you can actually more easily work with your internal self when you understand more of the areas that it takes place in. But because it takes place in such a quick manner in comparative to all the other bodies within our solar system, we're seeing it at a scale that it may be unnoticed. And it's so subtle that you're going to see this more on a collective scale in terms of the energy, but at the same time too, you're going to see it in your personal life if you're willing to see it. And it's more like an alignment. Like, you know, if you want to throw a ball, you're going to wait for the wind to be behind the ball instead of against it. And that's what these signs are trying to do. Since they exist out of polarity, as like one end is going to be this end and one end is going to be this end. For example, if you're looking at the Cancer Capricorn, internal security versus external security, there's going to be a gap in which way the flow is. That energetic wind is important to see on where your emotions are going to be swayed. How the body inside you, the water body, the percentage of you that is that water, and is that emotion, is that memory, is also going to be picked up no differently than the tide. So to see yourself for what you are comes from taking a look within to understand how you work emotionally, as well as what you're made of. And to see that on a metaphysical scale is taken to a degree that allows your consciousness to exist beyond that of an external factor, so that you're perceiving yourself in not only a third person, but you can entertain the idea of who you are on a metaphysical level. To see that your place in the universe, your existence, your combination of your birthlight pattern is unique, but at the same time too relatable based on where it exists. And as you're navigating through that, you and your different houses that exist inside your chart are also going to have an influence on where the bodies existing external to you in that solar system are going to play a role. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth in terms of the other planets, as today's more of a focus on the moon and its emotional influence. So, to wrap things up, we have the moon, and it goes around. The water in which is pulled by the moon's existence is key to understanding how it works on the massive scale and how it works on the individual scale. They both work at the same degree, and they both hold the ability to have emotion, memory, and the whole interconnected structure of communication, similar to how plants in a forest can connect and practically communicate through this means. So when you're working with that water, you get to work with yourself. You get to work with your inner self, and you are important to be in touch with that, because without knowing the ship that you are navigating, you may very well end up taking it in a direction or pushing it further past the limit than you are very well capable of doing. So it's very important to consider where your emotions are taking place and why they're taking place. With the moon's presence here, we're able to understand more the metaphysical point of view in terms of how we can work and understand these aspects of life, these workings of reality. And that's what the study of astrology will generally do. It will give you an open point of view in terms of interpreting what may be going on and how it may be expressed. And the different methods and ways and angles that one can be expressed there holds a lot of potential. Now, individually, we're all unique in terms of being able to hold each our own aspect. How we overcome that is a part of our nature of who we are as a being. It's like we cannot change the number of fingers that one has on a hand no differently than we can change the structure of how we are and the body that we exist in during this perceived lifetime. And working with that and understanding your nature is key, which is why astrology opens up those doorways for one to understand themselves. And as they understand themselves, they are able to more work with themselves in the reality that they are partaking in. Now, I don't want to go too far against the philosophy, and like I said, I'm wrapping it up. So, as one understands this lesson, the moon and the water are interconnected. Their associations with feelings are more in tune to how we are able to actually understand our inner selves. The idea that water can hold memory, it can hold emotion, is key to being able to connect the two and see it on a scale that is not initially perceived. Some may think that water is just what we drink. Some may see that we actually are mostly water. But it is important the properties of water have not been fully explored. And as that comes to light of day, we're going to see more and more how this theory, this idea, can be backed up more by the things that occur within the universe that we are observing. And through that observation, we're not only taking a scientific approach, which Aquarius is known for, we're taking it to a degree that is able to allow us to understand our place in the universe and our part that we're partaking in, and how personally the journey in which we walk is one that is unique to our own growth cycle, one that is unique to our own aspect of being. So I don't want this to be too long, and I always say that I'm going to cut it, and I'll wrap it up, and I'm not doing that right now, but now I am. So with that, if there's any questions, this was a little all over the place, and maybe I'll have a second go at this, but for now, I'll allow this lesson to exist out there, and until next time, stay true. And for those who are interested in talking more about this or discussing more about this, I have an astrology chat room in Telegram, and I will link that below in the description. So you're welcome to join and take part, and I will openly discuss there in my free time of this subjects and many more in terms of being able to better understand so that you yourself can educate yourself in a way that brings you to understand who you are, your place here, and how everything could very much be connected to a sense that provides you with that faith of how it all has its own purpose, its own divinity, and its own way of being expressed out and being manifested to exist, making it important to understand and connect with on a level that is much deeper than how you identify yourself. So with that, I shall say aloha as aloha goodbye, and until next time, stay true.